on his way. Devil is on his way. Devil is on his way, motherfucker. The devil gonna make you pay. Fall to your knees. Devil is on his way. Fall to your knees. Devil gonna make you pay. Fall to your knees. Devil is on his way.
Mountain Murders is an Appalachian true crime podcast. Some content may not be suitable for all listeners. Listener discretion is advised.
We say fuck a lot.
Hey, y'all. Welcome back to Mountain Murders.
I'm Heather.
And I'm Dylan.
Hey, Dylan.
Wow. Damn.
How are you?
I had a really good evening.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, it's not evening time. Well, thank you for sharing. I'm not sure how that's relevant at all to the introduction of our podcast, our greetings and salutations, but I appreciate that you throw that in there.
You ever have a great evening, a really, really great evening with your wife? And it's like has an afterglow the next day.
Well, you know, I would like to have a great evening with my wife.
Yeah.
She's out there somewhere.
It was such a good evening. I feel silly today.
Can I just say, real quick, I need to take my earrings off because they're making dangly, clinky sounds.
Yeah, Heather, what the hell? You're wearing some freaking wind chime earrings.
Yeah, well, those were a gift.
Okay.
They were a gift, Todd. Before we get started, Dylan, I would like to give a big shout out to our brand new patrons who are supporting today's show and sponsoring it. Jamie, who topped out at the top level.
Thank you.
Topped out.
Thank you, Jamie.
Jen, and also Christy.
Thank you, Jen.
Thank you, Christy.
Thank you, Christy.
Yeah,
Oh my
welcome to the
gosh.
Patreon family.
Jamie coming in at the top tier is so awesome. All you guys supporting us. You're literally helping us right now, like keep a roof over our heads. And that means so much to us.
It's true, because I've been trying to encourage Dylan to set up an Only Toes account, but he's not interested in showing anybody his bunion.
She swears there's a market for it.
There is a market for it, I'm
And-
telling you. Somebody wants to see your crusty toe.
She said I could sell my mill socks when I used to have mill.
I think you can.
If there's a video, I could send them a video of me wearing them
Dylan,
and then taking my boots off
different strokes.
and then sending it.
It's what makes the world go round. It's that spice of life. The spice of those mill socks.
It's going to be spicy.
Look, somebody out there wants these. I don't know. I think everybody should encourage Dylan. Onlyfans.com. Dylan from Mountain Murders. That could be your name, Dylan from Mountain Murders.
I'm gonna start a mill sock vending machine.
Pictures of your belly button.
It's a very interesting belly button. It's almost like one of those rabbit holes you go down when you're doing a conspiracy theory talk, because you literally can get lost in.
Yeah, I found a who living in your belly button actually.
true.
So there's that.
And a piece of a
Dylan, how
Q-tip.
are you today? It's what are we? The second week of July? Just cruising through the month.
Where did this year go?
I don't know.
I want to celebrate my independence, and it's already gone. And I didn't even get a chance to celebrate.
You're like, what's her name? Kelly Clarkson. You're like Miss Independent.
I am.
Dylan don't need no man.
I don't need no man.
Are you ready to get into today's case?
I already started. Never gets old. Never gets old. Do we sound good? I'm hot. Let's go.
You're hot?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's an audio term.
Oh, okay.
I have to ask Tom.
Nobody knows what you're talking about. Okay, so let's get into today's case, Dylan. This is one of those that I vividly remember this story in the news. It was one of those cases that really shocked the community and, well, just kind of captivated people nationwide.
Oh, God. I can't wait to hear which one. I know what it is. I'm just kidding. No, this was. I remember the media frenzy, the media storm. This was one of the early on sensationalized stories, much like O.J. Chase, that really catapulted us into what media has become nowadays. Entertainment, news entertainment.
Mary Carol Freeman was born in Knoxville, Tennessee in 1974 to parents Clark and Mary Nell Freeman. The family resided in an affluent, well-established suburb of Knoxville called Frontier Trail.
Oh, wow.
Mary Nell was a teacher and Clark was a real estate investor. He would buy properties at bargain prices, then flip them for profit, which a lot of people over the years have made good money with this venture.
Yeah, I must say, though, I do recall the 2008 bubble pop. I think this is when flipping really became like an everyman or every person type of thing, not just for, a few who knew about flipping. Everybody was doing it. And a lot of people got left holding the bag.
Right.
On
Well,
these- on
people
these-
made a lot of money flipping houses,
Yes.
but then there were a lot of people
Right.
who lost everything.
They got caught with their hand in the cookie jar.
Exactly. Well, the Freemans were active at the Laurel Church of Christ, where Clark served as a deacon. Laurel Church was known for their campus ministry at the University of Tennessee. According to reports, Clark was head of the household in every way. The family's lives were dictated by the guidelines and policies of the church. Clark was responsible for making decisions for the whole family. So this is one of those very, I guess what we would call very traditional.
I've lived under this burden. It's really it's a tall order. And thankfully, I have really big shoulders. And I can take everything upon my shoulders, and I can just hold up the whole family.
Now, are you trying to sell me on the idea that you've been in charge?
Oh, God, no. No, I just have to carry the heavy stuff. No, I don't make decisions.
Oh,
I mean,
well,
don't
see,
be
you're
ridiculous.
making it sound like you're the head of the household.
Oh, no,
that you make the decisions.
Oh,
I'm
no.
like,
No, to be clear.
you're very incompetent. There's no way I'm going to trust you to make important decisions for us.
Heather keeps my pants under lock and key. I walk around in nothing but underwear.
It's true.
It's very,
Okay.
very, very, very flattering underwear.
Not only do I wear my pants, but I wear your pants too.
She does.
Well, somebody has to be the adult around here.
Well, someone has to
okay?
see my fun prints on my very supportive underwear.
Listen, nobody cares. Will you stop? Nobody cares, Dylan.
I
Back to
care.
the story.
I'm getting cupped right now. Let's go.
Somebody please do something with this man. When Mary was 2, her sister Patricia was born. However, Patricia was diagnosed with cerebral palsy and developed spinal meningitis and encephalitis as an infant. She suffered from extreme physical disabilities and cognitive issues. Mary was extremely close to Patricia and often took her pillow into the younger sister's room to sleep. When Patricia passed away from a heart attack in 1987, it was difficult for the whole family, but particularly on Mary.
Oh, my gosh. Those are very significant infections. I'm sure that poor girl dealt with a lot in her life as far as her health went, and that'd be so hard on everybody.
Mary attended Mount Olive Elementary School, where she was known as being a quiet and obedient student. After her sister's death, Mary sought help from the school counselor, but when her dad found out, he forbade it. Clark believed it was a family matter and that Mary needed to rely solely on family and God for comfort, not secular professionals. He was not on board with psychiatry, which I think I'm not going to say it's a generational thing, but I do feel like there is a certain generation that they viewed psychiatry. It was still taboo. It was stigmatized. And they felt it was like a kind of a frivolous study or unnecessary.
Well, yeah, they thought it was a bunch of foo-foo nonsense, and that if you would just, strap your boots up a little tighter and put a little more dirt on it, you're going to be fine.
Like put on your big girl panties.
Yeah, walk it off. I was literally trying to explain walking it off to my granddaughter, my 4-year-old granddaughter, the other day, and she fell. And I was just about to say, hey, if you keep doing that, you're going to fall. No horse. She was spinning the chair in there in the living room. And I was just about to say, you better cut it out. But she went down and she got banged up. Did I rush to her aid? No, I did not. What did I say? That's what you get when you horseplay in the house. That's why we don't run in the house. And I just let it ride. And her mom, my daughter's looking at me like, she starts like, are you okay? I was like, she's fine. She's fine. Now she knows now. She learned a lesson. Actions have consequences. And now you're dealing with those consequences. And I was trying to explain to her, I was like, if you'll walk it off, walk around in the circle and come back to me, you'll be okay. And she's like, I'll be okay, Pop. And then, of course, my heart melts.
And then, of course, you're like, come here and see Pop.
Come here, let me hug you.
Yeah.
Let me enable you to, break the rules.
And be a whiny kid.
Whoa.
I'm just kidding.
I love it.
No, my parents were very much like, put some dirt on it.
Oh, dude, it was
You'll be fine.
Literally no blood, no foul.
Rub some pine needles on it.
No blood, no foul was an insurance status as we were growing up.
Yeah.
If it wasn't broke or protruding bones, you might as well not even alert the group of adults who have not checked on you in 6 hours.
No, I remember the one time very specifically that I jumped headfirst from the toilet into the bathtub because I thought I could be an Olympic diver.
Oh, my God.
And busted out my teeth.
Jesus.
And one of my front tooth turned black and then it fell out like a few days later. and it was pouring blood. And
So
we didn't go to the hospital or anything. It was like,
it's just a mild concussion. They would tell you not to go to
those
sleep.
are your baby teeth. It's not a big deal.
At least they didn't know what a concussion was.
So then I spent like 2 years without front teeth because, I was still waiting on my adult teeth to come in.
Oh, wait a second. If you took a shot to the head, they would tell you to go in and lay down and get some rest.
Yeah.
Maybe they didn't know.
You
about
have a concussion, you should go to sleep.
God love them, but I must say, right quick, we'll get back to it. I think that pendulum has swung too far the other way.
Well,
now
we're
everyone is
helicopter parents, and we're very like, oh. Well, see, I think that's the problem with our generation is we were very neglected as children.
Yeah.
Because a lot of us grew up in broken homes and parents working
Latchkey
2-3
kids.
jobs. Exactly. So we have we grew up with like almost borderline neglect, if not full neglect from our parents. And so as parents, we've become very like, oh, are you okay? And helicopter and
Jesus.
yeah. So,
Okay.
it's the direct result of our upbringing. Dylan.
I'm taking it back to old school in the next generation.
Okay, so Mary never properly grieved her sister's death, and she will be haunted by it into adulthood. So, I mean, maybe her dad should have been more on board with the counseling.
Well, of course. And a lot of times that was how he was raised. And he doesn't, he thinks he's doing the right thing, I'm sure.
By the time she was in middle school, the Freemans opened their home to a foster child named Shannon. Shannon had 4 other siblings, and the Freemans wanted to adopt all of the children, but they were told each child needed to have a bedroom. Clark, being a contractor, decided to add a room to the house. Yet by the time he finished the space, the kids were reunited with their biological parents. Meanwhile, life in Shannon's home was worsening, and eventually the state stepped in and took the kids once again. When they were placed up for adoption, this time, like for real, the Freemans adopted all 5 kids.
Wow.
Mary took to the role of caretaker immediately and acted almost as a second mother to the children. She was very loving to her new siblings and relished in activities like teaching them how to play tennis and showing them how to make gingerbread houses at Christmas.
I got to say, adoption in itself is, I think it helps a lot of couples.
It's a beautiful thing.
It's a beautiful thing. It's good for everybody, as long as everyone's, a good, clean player. But these people that insist on getting a whole group of siblings and stuff like that, that's a very noble thing.
Oh, absolutely.
You're opening your home up. You're all of a sudden, instead of incurring these costs slowly over years, as you have 4 or 5 kids, 3 to 5 kids, you're getting it all at once. And that's got to be a shock to the logistics and finances of a family. And I just think it's I don't know. I don't know the right word, but I'm in awe of these people that do this.
Oh, certainly. I mean, just the fact that they can open their homes up and love these children as if they are their own flesh and blood. I mean, it's really beautiful.
Now, the other part of my brain is like if you go to the animal shelter and it's like the choice between like getting a kitten and having to deal with the scratchies and teaching the kitten everything, or just getting an older cat that's already knows some stuff. So I wonder if they're viewing the kids at the adoption agency like that. Do I want a baby or do I want a kid that can drive?
What is wrong with you?
Well, I'm just saying I bet people probably would never ever admit it. They probably think about that. Do I want a kid who can help me cut firewood or do I want to change diapers?
Are you trying to bring a child home to like love and care for, Dylan? Or are you trying to get like a slave army? Like, what are you doing? Just, you know what?
That's the funny part of my brain.
Just stop.
Okay, I'll stop.
That's not the funny part of your brain. That's the fucked up part of your brain, Dylan. Now, in high school, Mary was interested in singing. She joined chorus. She played tennis, volunteered as a peer tutor for special education classes, and was active in youth life, which was like a religious club at school. She was described by those who knew her as studious, quiet, and happy, though Mary will later say it was all a facade. When she was upset, she would hide in the closet behind her clothes. But facing the world, she seemed like a bright, confident, smart young lady.
I've known people like that.
But at home, she's like a mess, a hot mess. Now, Mary finished school in 1992 and attended Lipscomb University in Nashville, which is a flagship college for Church of Christ. Though she was away at college, Mary was still active in the family life. She would often call home for Bible readings that her family would have at night, and she would call in and listen in on the phone.
Wow.
Right?
That's dedication.
After 2 years of studying, she decided to transfer to Freed Hardeman, a school which offered special education as a major, because Mary wanted to pursue that. and it's also associated with the Church of Christ. At Freed-Hardeman, Mary became involved in Phi Kappa Alpha, a social club, and also the Evangelism Forum. And this is where she met a handsome young athlete named Matthew Winkler. Now let's talk a little bit about Matthew Winkler, Dawn. He was born on November 21st, 1974 in Fort Worth, Texas. And Winkler's family had deep ties to the Church of Christ, with his grandfather being a third-generation pulpit minister. Wendell Winkler, Matthew's grandfather, had published 9 books on biblical theology and was also director of the Brown Trail School of Preaching in Fort Worth.
Wow.
Matthew's father was also a minister who had begun preaching when he was in high school. During Matthew's childhood, the family moved from state to state, eventually leaving small towns in Texas for small towns in Tennessee and then Alabama. Matthew attended Austin High School in Decatur, Alabama, where he was on the football team. And the boys were taught to exercise force on the field, but to be nothing but gentlemen off the field.
Yeah, and I think that's a good way to frame it.
Matthew also shared a very charismatic personality and was liked by fellow students. He was an excellent public speaker, a trait perfect for the pulpit. Known as a comedian, he had a love for life, but it was noted that growing up, he never really had a serious girlfriend. But people thought he was a handsome guy. He was good looking. Girls liked him, but he just seemed to be interested in other things.
Well, maybe he just didn't find the person he was looking for.
Matthew felt a call to the ministry, and by the time he graduated in 1993, he had his heart set on Freed-Hardeman University in Henderson. Modesty and appropriateness were mandated in clothing and hairstyles at the school. Shorts were allowed only during athletic participation. Attendance at chapel was a daily requirement at this college. After 1 year at school, Matthew met another student who was a year older than him. Mary and Matthew quickly fell in love, and within 3 months of dating, Mary phoned home to tell Clark and Mary Nell that she was bringing home a special friend.
Oh.
Before the weekend's end, Matt asked Clark Freeman for Mary's hand in marriage.
Oh, so he had intentions when he went.
So this is like the old school getting permission from dad first.
Hey, look here. I kind of like your daughter. I like her pretty much. I think I could be around her most every day of the week. You reckon maybe if when you get done feeding them hogs over there and if I help you, reckon I have her old hand in marriage? And she got good, strong hands, too. So I know she's going to be a big help around the homestead.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure my dad just told you I was built for plowing the field this past weekend. So you're in luck, Dylan.
Well, I knew it. I knew I knew I was getting a good one.
Yeah, you said I done sink them shoulders. I knew.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I can't help I'm built like a lumberjack, Dylan.
That's okay.
Now, less than 6 months after this proposal, they're married. Mary wore her mother's wedding gown. They walked down the aisle, and she and Matthew Winkler married on April 20th of 1996. So this was a bit of a whirlwind romance.
They waited longer than we did.
Yeah.
We were married faster than that.
Don't ever marry just some random guy with a big head.
You should.
It'll be the best day of your life.
It'll be
Sure.
the best day of your life.
You see, hear me go. Yeah. Clear my throat. That's not true. I'm lying.
I still owe this woman a wedding. And when we have it,
I don't want a wedding.
I'm inviting all the listeners.
I just want to go.
It's going to be a destination wedding.
Can we go to Vegas and get married by an Elvis impersonator?
That would be so cool.
That's the wedding that I really have always wanted.
Right after we ate that huge buffet you were talking about,
Yeah.
we should go straight and get married and then drink.
Ooh.
And then puke like crab legs.
That actually sort of sounds like what happened when we got married.
No, that's not true.
No, well, you did that,
No, I didn't.
and then I just left you there.
That's not true.
It was beautiful. We have a wonderfully romantic story. Okay, guys, back to the story. So at the end of the academic year, the couple dropped out of college in order to work and save money. They moved to Louisville, a tiny town outside of Knoxville. Matthew went to work for his father-in-law doing construction. This was like the summer, kind of shortly after the wedding, that things between the married couple started to sour. And Matthew began yelling at Mary on a regular basis.
Well, look here, Mary, these eggs is runny. Don't you ever again give me runny eggs.
Well, Mary wasn't really sure what she had done to provoke the behavior. Mary knew he was not happy, because he had to depend on her father for a paycheck, and he did resent dropping out of college. So at the time, she often would make excuses for his aggressive behavior.
But you chose to drop out. I mean, nobody made you do it. Nobody had a gun to your head. So, sometimes people will do these things, and then they'll
it's not the consequences of my own actions.
Well, they'll have buyer's remorse, but then instead of processing it properly, or like, what could I have done differently, blah, this and that, they just want to find somebody to blame. Oh, well, I did it for them. Well, no, you thought it was a good decision for you at the time. And when people hang on to that for years and years and years, I understand. There's moments in my life I think, hey, if it was a fork in the road, if you will. If I'd have went this way, it'd have been totally different. But you can't hang on to those moments. You got to live in the moment.
Well, exactly.
I mean?
And we all have to accept responsibility for the choices that we make.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, you may have made a decision and it turned out to be a dumb one or a bad one, right? A bad choice. And in the end, you're like, wow, I kind of fucked up. I shouldn't have done that.
Like when you married me.
But you have to pick up the pieces and move on from it. And you can't constantly, thrive on those negative choices. And you can't blame other people. You have to accept some responsibility for the choices that you make. And I think a lot of people don't do that.
I think you're right.
Because, I've heard like my parents make comments before, and I think, about how their lives, oh, well, we had you and our lives were this way or that way. Because I had young parents. But I'm like, you made the choice. It wasn't like I showed up and was like, hey, birth me.
Yeah, you're just waving your little arm out of your mom's vagina like, hey, you might have to come out.
Yeah, I mean, come on.
Yeah,
because my dad will be like, I've had to work my whole life. I ain't had no choice.
Can you DoorDash me some tacos?
And I'm thinking, well, you had a choice. You could have not gotten someone pregnant when you were young. How about that?
There's that.
But instead, you're just going to, make your child feel guilty. Like, you ruined my life.
Well, I got to say, I'm being a little silly, but I love you, and I would have married you the day after I met you. And my only regret is not meeting you sooner.
Oh.
It's true.
That's sweet.
Yeah. All right, back to the story.
Now, at 6'1", with a football player's build, Matthew was intimidating. I mean, he's 6'1", and he probably weighs like 240 pounds, and is not like a doughboy.
No, he's a man's man.
He's a athletic,
you get a
husky guy.
Yeah, 6'1", 240, 250, and a lot of it's up top in his shoulders and chest. That's a pretty big guy.
He's a big guy. Matthew would often stand inches away from Mary's face, pointing his finger at her as he yelled. If she tried to stand up for herself, he would tell her, "That's your ugly coming out."
Okay, that seems wholly inappropriate.
Matthew didn't like Mary's siblings coming over to their apartment all the time either, and told her she had to stop inviting them over.
Well, that's about control and isolation.
Now, eventually, the couple would return to Henderson, where Matthew would re-enroll in college. Mary became the sole breadwinner at this time. She secured a deli job at the local Piggly Wiggly. And by 1997, the couple welcomed their first child, Patricia. Matthew finally graduated in 1998 and accepted a job as a youth pastor in Baton Rouge. It was the first time that Mary had lived outside of Tennessee, and she was miserably homesick being in Louisiana. It was just a completely different environment. She didn't know anybody. It's hot. It's sticky.
Yeah, I think when you move, but you're in a similar environment, like you moved to another part of wherever, that's tough enough. But when you move to a totally, basically foreign environment, you're not used to the weather. You're not used to the plants. Your allergies probably could be through the roof. You're just, maybe it's hot. Maybe it's really cold. It's really hard. Like if you've grown up somewhere all your life, it takes a while to get acclimated to a whole new, weather system.
Matthew wasn't happy either, and he wanted to be closer to his family. Things went from bad to worse when Mary Nell was diagnosed with cancer. At the time, Mary was pregnant with her second child, and her mother passed away in April of 1999. With the death of Mary Nell, the adopted siblings looked to Mary for comfort and motherly guidance. By June of 1999, Matthew was able to get a job in Nashville, Tennessee at the Bellevue Church of Christ. He and Mary purchased a home in Pegram, I think I'm saying that correctly, which is a small town that was about 9 miles from the church. The day after the family's furniture arrived for them to move into this new apartment, Mary went into labor with her second child.
Now, can I point out that here you have two people, one just finished college. I'm going to imagine it's limited finances, but are still able to purchase a home because the values were not so out of whack with everything.
Yeah, remember that was back in the day?
You know, people like, you just don't work hard enough. They bought their
That's-
house for like $7,300. And they were making like,
You mean the myth of the American dream?
they're making $385, on part-time, minimum wage job, and put herself through college and bought a house.
The folklore
Yeah.
of affordable housing.
Yeah, you're just not working. You need to try harder.
It's the legend of the affordable rent.
Oh my God, you need to look at the statistic, you son of a bitch, because they are skewed. All right.
Mary Alice was born 5 weeks early on July 14th. So you got to think of the stress of this, fairly new marriage, kids kind of coming back to back.
Right.
She loses her mother to cancer while she's living states away.
She has these other siblings who count on her.
They're moving and she's pregnant.
Oh my gosh.
So, I mean, I can't imagine being like 9 months pregnant and then, oh yeah, by the way, here's my furniture at my apartment. The next day I go into labor. I mean, that's very stressful.
No, it's a lot.
And on top of it, she's got this husband who's screaming at her constantly.
A meathead. I'm envisioning a meathead, like this big, like thick neck football guy with like that. That white spittle. If someone's like giving me down the road, be it a foreman, boss, whoever. Typically, it'd have to be a foreman and boss because people don't usually get agitated in my face for some reason.
I get agitated in your face.
Well, you do. I mean, but you're an exception. Anywho, they get that spittle, that piece. That little white gooey drop that goes from like lip to lip as they're like hollering or talking at you. I can't listen to anything they're saying because I'm just watching the drop. I'm just like betting in my head like a damn blackjack hand, like what lips it going to end on when they end their sentence. Is it going to be on top or bottom, left or right? Yeah.
Are you done?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, Mary is not doing well. Not only is she still trying to process her mother's passing, but she also had some postpartum depression. And during this time, she's caring for a toddler and a newborn.
I mean, these are all the things at once. I mean, I just don't know how you could keep up with it.
When Mary's siblings complained that they hadn't gotten to spend much time with her over the last few years, Matthew told them that Mary's responsibility was to her new family.
How would you react if you're with someone who said that to your other family? Especially given knowing Mary's history, that these are her adopted siblings. She's like a mother figure. She's lost her mom. They're moving. Everybody. Yeah. I would tell them to fuck off.
Yeah. I mean, that's probably not going to go over well for me, but I don't really like being told what to do. So there's that.
No, even if I wasn't going to do it and you tell me I can't do it, now I want to do it.
Well, Mary's family had kind of all along felt this way about Matthew, but they're really starting to see that he's controlling, domineering, and a little mean.
Right.
Now, surprisingly, Mary agreed with her husband, though in the years to come, she will change her opinion. But at first, Mary's like, oh, he's absolutely right. Like, according to my faith, he's the head of the household. I've married him, so now this is my family. I stand in support of my husband. He's the household leader. So in the beginning, like, she's going along with what he's saying.
And there's a little merit to, if that's how they choose to live their life, then, you have to just, okay, that's her choice. And I think you should elevate your wife or husband above everyone else. That doesn't mean you have to stop talking to or loving kids or other family members, but I think they need to be you need to have them first for the most part. But he slowly got her to this point. He didn't do this overnight. Slowly it's, oh, I don't like that friend. They dress too provocative. Or, oh, I wish you wouldn't go out and drink with the girls. Or blah. It starts slowly. And then it ends like this, him moving her away and wanting to isolate her completely.
Parishioners at the new church felt a divide about the new couple. Some thought that Mary was the nicer, more social half. And then there were others who thought that Mary was kind of an oddball with poor social skills.
Okay, those are polar opposites.
Well, Mary was coping with a lot. Her mood swings were likely due to the loss of her mother and those back-to-back pregnancies. To make matters worse, Matthew invited his best friend and wife to move in with them while they waited for their new construction to be complete.
No.
4 adults and 2 kids in a small house was proving to be a lot. And Matthew was feeling the pressure too. He wanted a church of his own to pastor and felt the need to earn more money to support his growing family. The couple also found they were sexually incompatible. Mary was more traditional, and she spoke her mind about the acts that she felt were unnatural and uncomfortable. Matthew wanted to experiment sexually, but agreed to respect her wishes. Yet, during the heat of the moment, Matthew would sometimes go back on his word. And Mary would later say if she showed the slightest flinch or disinterest in what he was doing, that he would usually stop. But this became a cycle of behavior between Matthew's desires and Mary's expectations. So it's adding another layer of conflict to this already strained marriage.
Yeah. Well, everyone's got to be on board. You can't just get, some people get this thing, they're hot for this or they're into that, and they want to keep on. If your partner's not into it, it's not okay for you to keep pushing them until when they either just finally relent or, just do it so you'll hush. I think that's wrong. Would you agree?
Yeah, and, not to get into other people's lifestyles because everybody chooses to live the way that they want. But for people who are extremely religious and devout to that belief and, don't believe in premarital sex and wait until marriage, but then they find out you've married this person, but you're sexually incompatible with them, that can be tough. But if you're not experimenting before the marriage or sex hasn't been part of your relationship status with anyone at that point, and you're married, you're getting married and this is the first person you're with, I mean, that's a bit of an awkward curve that I'm assuming takes some time to work out. I don't know.
And I'm sure it works out for
I don't know,
plenty of
because
people.
I'm a big old hoe, so I don't know.
But I'm not going to buy the car unless I drive it. I'm sorry. I got to test drive it. And I want to make sure that I can, make the car feel good when I bring it back.
Because Dylan's,
we
all know you're a big old slut. It's
no,
fine.
I'm going to take the car out and I'm going to do the car right. I'm going to wash it. I'm going to vacuum it. I'm going to wipe it down. Yeah. I'm going to air it out. You know what I'm saying? I'm going to check all the fluids. Damn. How does that instantly just fit right in? I'm going to check that tire pressure and I might rotate those.
Are you making a fat joke about my tire pressure?
No.
Look, okay, I got the old spare tire, but that don't mean you need to add any air to it, okay?
But I'm gonna I want to make sure that I'm the right owner for the car as well. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And by I'm not saying I own my wife, obviously, but I do have papers on her. I do have a receipt. But yeah,
you checked my teeth and everything.
I would be really scared. That would be I don't think I could operate under those parameters of waiting for marriage and all that. And I guess there may be some excitement there, and sharing that special moment with your husband or wife would be kind of cool. But I would be very nervous that it's not going to work or we're not going to like each other. Just what you're describing.
Yeah, and I mean that probably happens less often.
Some people are allergic to each other
these days, but
like they literally have pain and stuff when they have sex from being allergic to each other. That's weird, but that's a real thing.
Is it?
Yeah.
Is that your medical opinion? It's a real thing. People's allergic to each other.
I would Googleize that shit. It'll show you.
Oh my gosh.
It'll show you.
Okay. So moving along. In spring of 2001, Matthew had a tooth issue and was prescribed a pain medication from the dentist. So yeah, this has to be 2001 because now if you are bleeding and you've lost, you're cut in half, they're going to be like, we can't give you nothing stronger than this Tylenol.
We know you've only been here once in the last 65 years, but we're going to err on the side of caution that you're pill shopping. Do you mind? I don't have an arm.
I mean, now they're not going to give you
shit.
Can
I get a couple of Vicodins, Doc? Shit.
No, they're not going to give it to you.
Like, you can go down there behind the big lots and the dumpsters back there and buy some from that boy.
The drug did not work for Matthew, and he became increasingly paranoid, believing his wife was trying to kill him. He threatened Mary, and at one point picked up a recliner, tossing it on its side. Wait, he's going full on like Incredible Hulk here.
So the pain meds didn't stop his pain? Didn't work?
No, the pain meds have some sort of he's having a bad reaction, Dylan.
Okay.
Right?
It's turned him
it's
into the Hulk.
making him like real paranoid. He's becoming violent, erratic.
Shit. Okay.
Now, I mean, I can kind of understand that to an extent because I can't take Percocet. And like the 1 or 2 times I've had a kidney stone and they've given me Percocet, it like I have a very adverse reaction to it. Now I don't become like He-Man or anything.
She turns into She-Ra.
Yeah, well I do, and then I get my golden horse and whatever. No, I become very like, it makes me super hyper.
Yeah.
You know, like
Yeah.
my mom will be like, that shit knocks me out for days at a time. But what are you doing? And I'm like bouncing off the wall, like, yeah.
Okay.
Like I got my arms
So
like Kermit.
So no perk 30s for you.
No.
And no.
So, but that's the thing, you know, some of these medications, I mean, they can just have an adverse reaction. And for whatever reason, it did not work for Matthew.
It's true. And on all these commercials the other night, I point out to you, it keeps saying, don't take this unless if you're allergic to it. Well, hold on a second. How the hell do I know if I'm allergic to it if I never took it?
Exactly. Well, Mary was scared because Matthew.
So he's freaking out.
Yeah. I mean, he berates her and whatnot, but she's never seen him like throwing shit around the house and kind of being scary.
It's like a full-on rage.
Yeah. So she calls her brother-in-law, Jacob, to come over. And due to Matthew's rants and raves, Mary was so scared that she left the house while wearing hair curlers and went over to the neighbors, who happened to be that married couple that had lived with Mary and Matthew. This couple, I know the wife was Brandy, and I cannot remember the husband's name, but they were like family friend. They were friends of this couple, and they moved next door.
I bet it was like Jeremy.
So she like runs over there and she's explaining to them like what's happened, but she's also really embarrassed by Matthew's behavior. So Mary's kind of trying to laugh it off, like, can you believe that, you know, this has really got him riled up, and trying to make excuses for Matthew. Now, Matthew had locked her out of the house. So the neighbor happened to have a house key because, again, he's Matthew's best friend. He's done some house sitting for them in the past, that kind of thing. He has to let Mary in the house because her husband's locked her out while in this violent state.
While he's hulked out.
Yes.
Okay.
Now, by the time they're able to get inside the house, Matthew has calmed down. The brother-in-law, Jacob, and the neighbor friend, they spent the evening watching over him until the morning hours, just to make sure that like he was going to be okay. And that's pretty scary.
Yeah, he wakes up next morning, he's like, Matthew, bad.
Well, just with something like this, you know, Mary probably didn't know what to expect. I mean, he could flip out again out of nowhere.
Well, here's the thing.
Hurt one of the kids. I mean.
Yeah. It's an adverse reaction, and you don't know if it's going to like be physically dangerous for him. You don't know what this compound he's taken is doing to him. So I'm sure you're worried on multiple fronts. Now,
in Pegram, Mary will say their lives were consumed with anger and were bad years. Matthew was unhappy and often yelled and threatened her, but he was not yet physically violent. Matthew did find another job in McMinnville, Tennessee, where they promised that he could potentially take over the church within 2 to 3 years. So in 2002, the family of 4 moved to McMinnville, which was known at the time for its plant and tree industry. They bought a home for $85,000.
Nice.
Yet when they moved again, Mary was pregnant. They're always moving when she's pregnant. And she suffered a miscarriage late in the first trimester. At the new house, the young couple befriended an older couple across the street, and they began spending a lot of time together. The Dennis family really took up with the Winklers, and especially their little girls. They had grandsons, but no granddaughters. So here they've got these 2 like cute little sweet girls, and they're just crazy about them. They start treating them as if these are their own grandchildren. At the new church, Matthew felt he needed to structure the youth leadership because the previous leader had been kind of lax, and Matthew was dedicated to whipping the program into shape. The family had busy schedules, and Matthew would often take trips during the summer with the youth groups. Mary was active as well. She would often help him by running errands, and when she wasn't working or running errands, taking care of the children, Mary was very active in the church. She would often visit the elderly, many of the homebound church members. She was also working part-time at a drugstore and had a second job at the post office.
Damn.
And on top of all of this, she's caring for these 2 small children. And she just suffered a miscarriage. So she's, again, got a lot going on.
And they just moved again.
So this is a lot of stress.
And at any minute, Matthew might pop off, bro. He might fuck around, take some ibuprofen or some shit, and just be like, "Rah!"
Take a baby
I'm like, oh God, you let him take a leave? He can't take that. He's gonna be worked up for 3 days. Damn it.
That's what happens when you give Dylan an X-Lax.
Yeah.
He's worked up for 3 days. Violent.
I prefer non-stimulant.
I was going to say
personally.
Violent.
Yeah,
the violent
all
things that come
natural.
from his body.
Oh.
Now, from the outside, people saw Matthew and Mary as a model couple. They seemed to be very hardworking. They were dedicated to their family. But Mary would acknowledge the times were tough behind closed doors.
Well, sure
and this
they
is
are.
definitely one of those situations where you got what appears to be picture perfect family, picture perfect household, but behind closed doors, things are very bad.
Well, he obviously has a passion to, for the pastoring and being a pastor and youth
For the
pastor.
preaching?
For the preachings. But that is not, I'm going to assume that's not a path that's just, got a whole lot of job opportunities that pay really good money that's going to help you take care of your family of 3 or 4 or 5 or whatever. You know what I'm saying? So I'm sure that's more of a, you may eventually get there to good, decent money, your own church and all that, but it takes time. And all that time, every day you have to raise kids. So I know it was hard. And she's out working, job and a half, 2 jobs, whatever, and helping him. And this is somebody, Matthew, I think, would be someone who worries about outward appearances because he has a church, he has a reputation.
Oh, he absolutely does. And we're going to talk more about that in a few minutes.
And when you have these people who everyone thought it was perfect, but, behind closed doors, there's all these pressures, financial, whatever. That's because they presented this facade to the public. It's engineered, because and it's because they care what people think. People don't give a fuck what people think. You see their damn, their dirt and their dirty laundry kind of spills over into the public sometimes. They don't care. It's like, whatever. I'm dealing with this. Who cares? But yeah, so poor Mary is all I can say.
Well, in August of that year, Mary was playing softball and was hit by the ball, like in the face. So she had a bruise, but she didn't go to the doctor because she didn't really think it was a big deal. But later that week, Mary and Matthew were in a bit of an argument. And by that, I mean Matthew's yelling at her over some perceived slight. Then he knocked something off the table, and when Mary bent down to pick it up, Matthew kicked her in the face. So this is the first time he's getting physical with her.
So he goes from 0 to 60. Because I'm sorry, kicking someone in the face is something I have not ever done to my most horrible enemy. I think it would be, it's a very devastating thing, and I would only do it in a survival situation, honestly.
Mary went to the doctor because her face felt very painful, like she knew something wasn't right with it. But she told the doctor that it was the ball and not her husband because she was embarrassed. And we see this with a lot of victims of domestic violence. They will make up excuses. Oh, I got hit with the door. A ball hit me.
I turned around and hit the cabinet door.
Yeah.
I
fell
walked
down the
into
stairs.
a door jam or, my car punched me and kicked me in my stomach 3 times because I called his friend.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, back at home, Mary confronted her husband, stating for the first time she wanted a divorce. Matthew told her he would not allow it. Mary said she was tired of the verbal abuse because he often called her fat. He made fun of her hair and accused her if anything went wrong with the children. It was always her fault. Matthew told her what she could wear, how to dress, what makeup she was allowed to wear. I mean, he really controlled every aspect of her life.
This doesn't seem very godly or Christian. Is anyone else missing that point? I think Matthew's missed the whole point of this entire religion that he claims to be, a purveyor of, if you will.
Well, there's that, Dylan.
Well, I mean, geez,
Matthew
dude.
told her that if she left, he would, quote, come and find her.
Okay.
In 2003, Matthew was offered a teaching job at Boyd Christian School, which is a college preparatory private school. Matthew was welcomed as an addition to the staff. Students called him Wink. And though he was a tough teacher who demanded the students work hard, he was also considered a fun, engaging teacher in the classroom, often noted for, being a really creative teacher, coming up with really fun ways to engage students and get them going. Described as being a loving family man, coworkers mentioned how he always spoke positively about his family and his daughters in particular, and would often tell the faculty and staff cute stories about his little girls.
Yeah. And this is his bullshit right here. These little anecdotes. I'm not saying they're not true stories, but he's just Mr. Positive. These people would never ever, if Mary was to come say, well, when he gets mad at me, he scares me and the kids, and they'd be like, oh, well, there's no way. Not Mr. Wink. He'd never do that.
Well, again, from the outside, the marriage looks wonderful.
Right.
People saw Matthew and Mary interact in loving ways. When they were in public, he was always doting on her. Like if it was cold, he would take extra, care to take his jacket off and wrap it around her. Yeah. And so people saw these like little gestures and really thought like, oh, well, they're very sweet and have a loving marriage. Yet others found Matthew to be different. One of the church secretaries, a woman named Lori Boyd, found him difficult to work with. At first, he was friendly enough, but that morphed into aggression. Often he would mentally and verbally berate the woman. And, he has to work with her. And she has to work with him. She's a secretary, so anything he needs, he's coming to her. But she's like, he's kind of a jackass.
He's a dick.
He would tell her, quote, "You will have this done when I say so."
Yeah, see, here's an insecure man. This is what I'm getting out of this. Insecure man, and if a woman gives him any attitude that's opinionated or straightforward or just a go-do attitude can really, these types of guys can't deal with that.
Yeah, Lori found him really difficult to work with.
Right.
And she was also aware that his marriage was strained. She could often hear words being exchanged between the couple when they were in his office, like Mary and Matthew behind closed doors, but she couldn't make out exactly what was being said. But she would hear this very angry, deep voice just sort of pulsating out of the office. And she knew that Matthew was yelling at his wife or scolding his wife.
Right.
And Mary would often bring lunches by the office, which was usually a fast food lunch. Because again, she's working, she's taking care of kids. She probably doesn't have time to cook the most healthy meal to, prepare this meal to bring him.
I would just throw a burger at him too. Let's be honest.
And Lori noted that Matthew often left these lunches uneaten. She would take the time to bring him lunch and he would just have it sitting on the corner of his desk and then just knock it into the trash can.
Well, say if you don't want it, tell her don't take time out of her day to bring it down there. You're okay. You'll just have an apple or something.
Lori would hear Matthew tell Mary, quote, "You're getting a little larger than you need to be. You don't need to have this food, Mary." And after hearing this, Lori was appalled and she confronted the pastor. She told him she was really disappointed that a man of God would speak to his wife like that and that he was a leader and that leading by example was important and that she thought this was just absolutely repugnant behavior coming from a religious leader. So he did not like that. And again, they're butting heads. Lori also told Matthew that she was troubled by the way that he treated his kids. If Mary needed to drop the girls off at church because of her schedule, Matthew would lock the little girls in his office. Lori would suggest, why don't you let them go downstairs to the nursery or to the kids area where they can play
and read
and hang out. But he would insist that he wanted his daughters to be, quote, safe. Well, they're in your church. How are they not safe being there?
He doesn't want to take the time to have to deal with it.
Well, and again, it's controlling.
So it's easy for me
my
to just,
way.
Yeah.
I'm going to make you sit in my office and be bored.
Right.
Because I'm in charge.
And also,
instead of just letting you go have a good time.
A fire hazard. Locking anyone in a room is freaking insane.
What little girls want to be locked in a fucking office?
And he don't have to be inconvenienced at all to go look for them, find out where they are, keep up with them. I'll just lock them in here. It's easier for me.
Other members noted Matthew's treatment of Mary. Some witnesses, parishioners of the church, had seen Matthew yelling at Mary, but they would never see her retort. They would just say he would be scolding her and that she would just sort of hang her head down, look at the ground, not make eye contact. She looked like a very downtrodden woman. She seemed to do everything that Matthew ordered her to do without argument. One member spotted Mary in at the church with a black eye on this one particular day. And when they asked her about it, Mary said the children had accidentally hit her when they were horse playing. But later, the same church member saw Mary's demeanor change when her husband came around, and that member never looked at Matthew the same. That member immediately was like, something's going on. Mary stopped talking. She dropped her head. She seemed scared. There was speculation about what was going on at the Winkler household. So you did have a few members of the church who were like, I think he's beating her up.
Well, yeah. I mean, they're seeing this, his secretary seeing all this aggression at work. And I mean, you get a feel for people's energy and their vibe. And you keep acting like that, it's not going to be long before. And I'm telling you, any time you see, I don't know if it's sexist to say it like this, a man giving a woman down the road and she's like looking down, or I'd say anyone. I've typically saw this in a man-woman relationship. She's just looking down at the ground, or that person's just looking down. They look defeated. They're not standing up for their point in the conversation or argument or whatever you want to call it. It's just, I mean, it tells you all you need to know, honestly. I mean, some people are just naturally kind of diminutive and meek, but it's just, she's been browbeat, over years and years.
And both Winklers had secrets. Mary was a secret smoker, and Matthew used chewing tobacco, and it seems like these were secrets they kept from each other.
Oh, yeah.
And that Mary, she would even go buy these items at a store like across town where she didn't think anybody would recognize her. Because, again, they are so obsessed with appearances.
So she's a whole secret smoky mouth bitch. Yeah.
And he's a tobacco chewer.
Yeah,
so.
He's getting a big old chaw.
So he's an old juicy mouth bitch.
He's an old speedy bitch.
Ugh.
Yeah, and he's carrying on, raging and hollering with like tobacco bits in his teeth.
Some snuff.
Yeah.
Some red man all chawed up in his jaw.
I'm like, maybe instead of worrying about that, you need to go brush him damn teeth.
Now, an elderly neighbor was passing away, and her family, one of the members happened to be a state trooper, her son. They were in town because this neighbor of the Winklers is ill, so her whole family's there, kind of at the end, kind of waiting it out, if you will. And they had an incident with Matthew. Now, this state trooper guy, he sees Matthew outside and he thinks, oh, well, there's that new minister, and he's probably coming over here to our property to tell like the family that's gathered around outside, sorry, and to offer up condolences. Instead, Matthew approaches them waving his arms erratically, and they're like, what is he doing? And they find out that he's screaming at a dog that's barking.
Okay.
And they're just like, what is he doing? He's like a fury. He comes out, he's waving his arms, he's screaming and hollering. You've got this family who's, having a really hard time. They're losing their loved one, and they're just like, what is this maniac guy doing? The trooper labeled him as the Tasmanian devil after seeing this.
So he's causing this big old scene.
And the family starts calling him the Tasmanian devil.
Here he comes
so
again.
They're just like, what the hell?
So he must have made quite the spectacle of himself.
Yes.
For everyone to be like, oh my God, here comes that crazy guy again.
It gets worse, Dylan. Despite being told that he would be taking over that church in McMinnville, the church elders decided to hire another minister to fill the position. So Matthew is angry and disappointed. He begins looking for position at another church.
Well, and I'm sure that this is filtered back to the elders that, hey, this guy's not exactly who he acts like. He's kind of an asshole. He's being mean to such and such. And that's the type of things that's what's going to get you in a situation like that.
Well, in small towns, word does get
like
around.
hell, I saw the guy beating a damn groundhog up down there under the creek, by that little bridge by the gas station.
He was just beating it up. Huh?
Yeah, he was kicking that groundhog's ass, screaming that he talked him into making a poor real estate investment. And I just thought it was very strange. Because as far as I know, that groundhog's tips are always sound.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know about anybody out there, but you really cannot trust groundhogs who were into real estate.
I mean, we know that now.
Badgers are much more trustworthy. And they'll always get you a waterfront property.
And they won't, they're tenacious. They will go after a deal and they won't stop till they get it.
Yeah.
That's how.
But if you wrong them, they will chew the hell out of your porch. So you better watch out.
Fucking honey badger? You fucking go around. You go ahead and try it if you want to.
Okay, wrap it up, Dylan, because we got to move along.
I'm just letting you know.
So Matthew soon interviewed at a church in Selmer, Tennessee. and he was offered the job leading the 4th Street Church of Christ. And to add to the news, Mary learned she was pregnant again. Yet Matthew was disappointed when he found out it was another girl and blamed Mary for it.
Of course he did. This doesn't surprise me one bit. That Matthew's disappointed it's not a boy. Which, I mean, everybody understands that a little bit, I guess. I would just be happy to have another healthy baby, I guess. If I was trying to have kids, that is. And then he's going to blame Mary.
Well, the Winklers have always been a family of boys. You know, he had male siblings. They've been a kind of a boy family. So now he's got all girls, and he doesn't like it.
And I can't believe you keep picking girls on your pregnancy.
I know your uterus is doing this on purpose to spite me.
Probably got one of them pink hats on, too.
Matthew was earning about $50,000 annually, and they gave him use of the church's parsonage. The house was near the elementary school where the girls would attend. Mary was pregnant again and trying to move into a new house.
Jeez.
So once again, she finds herself struggling. Allie, which is Mary Alice, the little girl, they called her Allie, she was nervous about a new school. And she was also concerned about the addition of a new baby. She began crying every day, and eventually the school called Mary in for a meeting because this little girl's very emotional.
Well, she's probably worried about a lot of stuff. I'm sure with these, every time she gets these pregnancies, then they move again because of his work. And I'm sure these are almost cyclical situations.
And little kids are very perceptive.
Oh, yeah.
So even if you're not fighting, if Matthew's not behaving this way in front of his kids, they're still sensing tension in the household, and they know that something's not right.
Yes.
Like, even if they don't know exactly, kids know.
That's why, honestly, to a degree, and I'm all for protecting the kids away. They don't have to know every little thing going on or be worried. You know, that's the parents' responsibility. But when things are really rough or tough and big, significant situations going on,
you can't always shield kids from that, and they need to understand.
Right.
I mean, like, for example, you know, you lost your job along with like 1,200 other members of this community. And for people who are trying to, oh, well, you know, I don't really want my kids to worry that, you know, mom or dad doesn't have a job. No, it's okay to tell kids, hey, we have to make changes. This is part of life. Sometimes bad things happen, but this is how we're going to adapt and overcome as a family. And we're going to stick together and we're going to work together. And so you can make these bad moments teachable moments.
Yeah, you can give them the PG version.
And it doesn't have to be kept from kids, because I think oftentimes, I mean, kids are going to know that something's not quite right anyway.
That's the reason I went into that whole thing was for what you're saying, because they are little tuning forks. Even if they know deep in their heart or in their lizard part of their brain that something is going on. And it's scarier for them, I think, if you just never tell them and you know they keep going through this.
They're just kind of left to worry.
If you let them say, look, I know that you might see me, you know, crying or mad lately. Here's what's happening. I'm sorry. And like I said, you can do a little soft PG version, but, you know, I still love you. I'm just dealing with this stuff. Everything's going to be okay. But I think it's oftentimes good to let them know that something is going on and, you know, and ask them if they have any questions. Because a lot of times a few simple questions from a child can allay a lot of their concerns and fears. All they have to do is ask you.
Well, Dylan, Matthew quickly fell into conflict with new neighbors in Selmer.
I can't believe it.
Over their 15-year-old Rottweiler.
Yeah, see, he seems to have a thing. And they have a bunch of dogs who play poker out in the garage. And that really gets on his nerves.
Yeah.
Because that German Shepherd can't drive for shit after a few martinis.
The gambling's a sin.
Right.
Now, the Everetts, that's this family. They were neighbors of the Winklers. They had 6 foster children living in their home. And one of the children ran into the house screaming that a man was trying to kill the family dog.
Oh, my God.
Now, Mrs. Everett, feeling that the kid must have been confused about this new minister, because she's like, no, that's a minister. What are you talking about? She makes her way over to the Winkler household and she introduces herself. And Matthew was very stern and immediately says to her, I think I made myself really clear, which was astonishing to the woman. She was like, what are you talking about? Like, she's just saying, hi, Ms. Everett, I'm your neighbor. And she's immediately confused. And so she says, oh, well, you know, the children said you were talking about shooting the dog.
You were fighting our dog.
And I told them that they had to be mistaken.
Yeah.
You know, and I wanted to come introduce myself and explain the dog's 15 years old.
Yeah.
She's not a bother. And he admitted, yes, I have said that to your children. I did tell them I would shoot their dog. He said if the Rottweiler ever came onto his property or after his children, he would kill it.
Okay. So, and during this period of time, the Rottie was one of the famous breeds, everywhere, all over the news, attacking people, the public scared. So Matthew he doesn't even hesitate to tell a new neighbor, that, yeah, I did tell your kids that crazy shit. And I stand by it.
Well, Mrs. Everett assured him that it's an elderly dog. This elderly dog is accustomed to children. She's very good with kids, and she would never hurt them. Matthew told her if he ever saw the dog in the yard again, he would kill it. So Sharon Everett was immediately confused. This was not new neighbor behavior, first of all, and she was not expecting a preacher to behave in this way.
No.
Her foster children, though she tried to assure them everything is going to be okay with this guy.
Every time they look over, he's like waving his arms.
It'll be okay. The foster kids were immediately afraid of Matthew Winkler after this. And they would never try to play with the Winkler girls unless he was away from the home. Like they would only want to play with the Winkler girls if they had seen Matthew in his car and left, because they were so afraid of him.
And you can't blame them. From a kid's perspective.
Well, yeah. If some maniac comes over and is like, I'm going to shoot your dog, that would be terrifying to most children.
This big, scary meathead dude and like the old gray dogs laying over can't hardly stand. And you're just like, why? Why are you going to kill my dog, mister? They don't know about people being scared of the breed or that this guy's got issue with dogs. They're just instantly terrified by the new neighbor.
Well, Sharon Everett had determined and decided to tell her husband, quote, any man who talks like that to another man's wife is a man who abuses his own wife.
Boom.
But her husband kind of dismissed this theory. But a few months later, he found himself in a confrontation with Matthew Winkler. As Mr. Everett is cutting grass, he sees Winkler and turns off the mower to greet him. Instead, Matthew comes over and threatens to shoot the dog, saying, quote, your dog is in a neighbor's yard. I've warned your wife. I'll shoot the dog.
So this is his first interaction with Matthew, basically, in face-to-face?
Yeah.
So his wife's like, oh, you're overreacting. The kids, y'all, okay. Women. Huh, yeah. And then next thing you know, here's the insane clown posse over there loading his fucking pistol. I'm going to kill your dog.
Well, it turns out their family dog, this 15-year-old Rottweiler, was inside the house, so it wasn't their dog. It was some other dog in the neighborhood. But Mr. Everett immediately tells his wife, you're probably right. I bet he's an abuser.
Oh, yeah, this guy's out of control. He's a maniac.
March 9th of 2005, Brianna Winkler was born. She had respiratory trouble and kept the new mom and baby for observation the hospital did, so she was, away for a week or two before she was able to bring the baby home. And when Mary is home with the baby, she is having trouble adjusting because, she's had a rough pregnancy. The baby's had these problems. And Patricia accidentally hits her sister Allie with a golf club. And it results in a surgery.
Oh, gosh.
So this medical bill, coupled with this childbirth, and the fact that they had an extended hospital stay, creates a huge financial burden for the family.
Oh, my God.
Because I'm sure if they have insurance, it's probably they're paying out of pocket. I'm sure the church isn't paying for their health insurance. So they're probably solely responsible for these hospital bills.
My gosh.
And having this, huge bill for a baby, and the baby has to stay. Then, your kid has this accident, has to have surgery. It's a lot of money.
I saw this thing. I don't even know. It was so random how I saw it, but it was saying how, there's kind of a resurgence of at-home births with the midwives or the doulas.
Yeah.
And a lot of people were like, hey, I was at home, it was very comfortable. It's not so sterile and stressful, and I could get rest when I needed to, there, and all that. But the medical system in our country acts like that's like I'm sorry, that like that you can't do that, like it's the wrong thing, it can't be safe and all that. When we've been birthed like that for how many years before we actually went to the hospital? Thousands, right?
Yeah, your grandma
Born
was
in a
probably,
cave.
I was gonna say your grandma probably born on a damn dirt floor in
Yeah,
a cabin
I'm saying
somewhere. I mean,
caves,
women
dirt
been
floors,
birthing babies for millions of years.
wagons on your way out west, ships coming across. I mean,
Mangers.
it's a really fairly natural process
Barns.
that's going to happen. Now, granted, you could.
The back seat of an El Camino.
I'm
Oh,
sure-
wait a minute. The El Camino doesn't have a back seat.
I'm sure people out there are like, well, yeah, and the infant mortality rate was like 89, dude. You know, like they didn't make it as.
Well, ain't nobody had no hospital bill though, Dylan.
But you wouldn't have no damn old hospital bill. You know, you just pop them out. Just go back there behind the car, back on the back corner of the garage, so I can hose it down the hill when you get done.
Well, look, that baby's coming out regardless.
Irregardless of
and
what
the
you
fact
do.
that we have to pay, $30,000 for somebody to just stand there while this baby slingshots out of you.
For the 3 minutes that it's happening, because like the rest of the time, it's just been nurses. You haven't seen anybody.
And they're just like telling you to calm down.
No, I'm saying, obviously the babies get a lot better care, and if there is something wrong, then you're in a better position. But yeah,
Well,
I think
anyway,
I'm just gonna have my babies in the garage.
Well, they're creating this. It's a big financial burden for this family, right?
Yeah, well, fortunately, he's a very reasonable person who's able to adapt.
Okay. Well, because of these financial burdens, Mary was very excited to deposit a check for $6,455 into the couple's bank account.
What the hell did she get that from?
This was on December 1st.
That's a chunk.
Now, at the time, Mary had no idea the check would bounce because she thought she'd won a sweepstakes entry, and we'll get more into that later. You remember back in the day when they would send you a check in the mail and tell you had won,
Yeah,
but then it turns out it's not a real check?
No, it'd be like Publishers Clearinghouse or somebody like that, right?
Well, Mary didn't know that was a fake check. She really thought she had won, and she was excited to have this extra money and put it in the couple's bank account.
Oh my gosh. They actually let her deposit it.
Yeah, they did. Now, Mary, and I think there were some issues with this back in the day because some of the checks did look very authentic.
Right.
And there were issues where people were depositing, and then it was like, no, this in very tiny print. It's like, this is not a real check kind of thing.
Right. And you see a lot of that nowadays. You've already won, just, blah, blah, blah. Yeah. And people, we're much more aware of scams and stuff like that nowadays, or just pure junk advertisement and mail. And back then, people didn't even think about that shit, Hey, it looks like a check. It must be a check, right?
Mary enrolled for 9 credit hours at Freed-Hardeman, hoping to finish her degree and secure a special education teaching job, because that had always been her dream, to be a special ed teacher. And she's given up a lot to be with Matthew. I mean, she dropped out of college when they got married. She's worked and supported him throughout his career. So now she's like, hey, it's time for me.
Popping out kids left and right.
So good for Mary. But around February, Mary learned that the deposit, that check she had deposited in December, had not cleared. So on February 11th, she went into a Regions Bank with $100 and opened a brand new account with her name on it. She changed the mailing address of the account to a P.O. box that is only in her name.
Oh, yeah.
She then wrote a check for $7,000 from this new account and deposited it into the old account, hoping that she would be able to cover this overdraft on the joint account.
Oh, shit, Mary. You're playing a dangerous game now. Yeah, a lot of people nowadays, younger people don't realize you had a window with a check. You'd give the check to the person. They'd put it in the drawer. Later that day, they might put it here. They might only go deposit once a week. And, everything was done by hand, basically. So you had a couple weeks. You could float a check. And people oftentimes did that back then.
While Mary was in class, Matthew also decided he was going to enroll in a master's program at the Bible college.
Of course.
Now, Matthew told his family that he would be able to pay for everything with money from a car accident that he had previously. He'd gotten a settlement. They had planned to take money that Mary earned from her teaching job, and that's how they would pay off their new minivan. So Matthew's like telling his family, oh, well, we got the settlement. We were able to get out of debt. We can pay for Mary to finish school. And when she starts earning money, she'll be able to pay off this new vehicle we got. I'm using some of my settlement money to pay for school. Like it's all, we're able to handle it. It's all working out for us, right? But Mary had not told him about the mess at the bank. So as the days went on, she's starting to grow panicked because there are no funds to cover the checks and deposits that she's been trying to finagle.
So I'm assuming the problem is she thought she had $6,000 extra dollars, which is a chunk of money. That's a chunk of money now, let alone back then. And so she maybe was like spending a little more than maybe she actually had. So when it all washes out, the account's going to be in the negative. I'm assuming that's the crisis.
Yes. Well, Mary began working as a substitute teacher on March 21st. Now, around this time, she's getting calls from the bank, like every day, about these bogus deposits. And the bank basically tells her, like, you have to come in and speak to a bank manager because if you don't clear this up, this could turn into a legal matter.
Well, yeah, I mean, they might get you for some type of fraud or something.
Well, at this point, Mary's account is overdrawn by $5,000.
Oh, my gosh.
So Mary asks if she can take Matthew's name off the joint account. And they tell her no, you cannot. They explained to Mary that her account was being frozen because she was kiting checks, which was a criminal offense. Mary learned there could be these criminal charges filed against her if she didn't straighten out the situation. The bank informed her that not only did they need to speak with her in person, but that she needed to bring her husband down to the bank as well.
Oh, gosh.
And Mary is trying like hell to keep Matthew out of the loop.
Obviously. But I must say,
she does not want to feel Matthew's wrath.
it's Matthew's fault that she feels that way, but it's very unfortunate because this is a really big situation. This is a big situation that can have some very serious consequences.
Oh, yeah.
And it wouldn't be this messy this far if she could have just turned to him and said, look, I did this thing. It wasn't what I thought. Can we fix it together? Instead, she's made it worse because she is afraid to tell Matthew about it. And I don't ever think a husband and wife should ever live under that. A cloud like that where you feel like you can't openly talk to each other about anything. I mean, sometimes you're I'm like, hey, come in here and look at my butthole. Is it okay?
I have no.
And you do.
That's not
and that's love.
Yeah. If you've ever watched This Is 40, that's a pretty good depiction of most marriages.
And I
at
sit
a certain age.
and I groom you like the chimps did on the documentary. I groom you and I eat them. The little things I get off of you, the little bugs and stuff.
I don't have bugs.
And it's,
groom me. I'm like, well, because you shave my mohawk, you shave my sides for me. That's grooming me. Thanks.
I'll shave anything. I mean, I'll shave your feet.
I was gonna say you'll shave my hairy toe. Actually, I don't have a hairy toe. But as a kid, my mom's sister, and she's no longer with us, but my aunt had very hairy toes, and she was like very embarrassed about it, I guess. And I remember as a kid, she would, if we were going to go to the pool or something,
shave them.
She would be in the bathroom shaving her toes. And I would be like, what are you doing? And she'd be like, don't you see I get these few little hairs on my big toe? And I just always thought that was so weird as a kid. And she was pretty young. I mean, she was very, she was only probably like 7 years older than me or something. But as a kid, I would be like, whoa, she's shaving her toes again. Weird.
Yeah, dude, she has hairy toes, man.
Yeah, and then I would go tell people, my Aunt Christy shaves her toes. She would be like, shut up.
Little shit.
Okay, so on this evening of March 21st, after she gets this bank call that's essentially like, this is it. Like, you come down here and you bring your husband or else.
Or you'll be talking to the police.
We will file criminal charges.
Yeah.
Matthew was venting for a period about some actions that the church administration had taken. So he's, getting all that out. And that's when he launches into Mary over the money. She tells Matthew, look, I've got this situation. I need you to join me at the bank office. And he refuses. He tells her it was her irresponsibility handling their finances and that she needed to work this mess out.
Well, I would just go in. Okay, if that's the way you want to play it, bud, let's do it. I would go in there and I would blame Matthew for everything.
Well,
I would say, hey, you should have came, bud. I don't know what to tell you.
So this next morning, when Mary and Matthew were due at the bank, she's probably very upset and panicked about what's going to happen.
Yeah, and he doesn't even know probably how shitty this situation at the bank is.
Well, early that morning, Mary wakes up because Matthew is shoving his foot against her leg, telling her to go shut her up, meaning the new baby, because the baby is crying. Mary didn't move fast enough, and when she eventually did get up, Matthew's ahead of her, walking down the hall and into the child's room. She follows down follows Matthew into the baby's room, and she catches him putting his fingers over the child's nose in a pinching motion and covering the baby's mouth.
Whoa, fuck that. Mm-mm.
Mary said, "Stop. You can't do that." She's like, this baby has had respiratory problems. You can't do this to her.
Well, you can't do that to any kid,
Like,
man. What the
that's
fuck's
not
wrong with you?
okay.
Oh, my God.
So he leaves, whatever. And then Mary calms the baby down. She goes into the kitchen and she's feeling really angry with her husband. I mean, this is a step too far. She called it the suffocation, and she had seen her husband do this with their other daughters when they were little. Brianna had these respiratory problems, and Mary knew this was very dangerous. She hadn't liked it when he had done the suffocation to the other children.
The fuck? So he's when a kid won't go to sleep or is crying, he's cutting their oxygen off until they pass out. Is that right? Is that what I'm to get from this?
I'm not sure, Dylan.
That's what it sounds like.
But Mary's mad. I mean, she's like, I've had enough. She goes into the bedroom and she tells him, we need to talk. But instead, he snuggles into the blankets, like purposefully ignoring her with his eyes closed. Like, I'm not listening to you.
Yeah.
Just blowing her off. And Mary, she's had enough, bro. She opens the closet and grabs the Remington 870 Express shotgun.
Oh, shit.
Mary points this gun at her husband, and she says again, I want to talk now. When he made no sound and refused to acknowledge her, Mary pulled the trigger. Matthew rolled off the bed and fell into the floor. Now, at this time, Patricia wakes up because she hears the sounds of a gunshot, this loud noise. She also hears her dad falling onto the floor. He hits a nightstand. It's a ruckus.
It's a commotion. It's a row.
So when the child reached the doorway, Matthew yells, call 911. But Mary tells the child, I've already called 911 and we need to get your sister. So they gather up the other two children, and Mary takes the children and straps them in the van. She goes inside, grabs the gun, and stuffs it into the brown carrying case that, is used for the gun. And Mary drives away with the gun in the back of the van and leaves Matthew Winkler to bleed out on the bedroom floor.
Damn.
Mary didn't know exactly where to go, and she thought about going to Matthew's parents' place, but remembered they were on vacation, so she couldn't go there. Instead, she started driving toward Mississippi and then continued heading south. After nearly 4.5 hours in the car, the children were beginning to be restless, and that's when Mary checked into a motel with an indoor pool. She found a Walmart where they bought swimsuits and some extra clothes. They played in the motel pool while Mary kind of made plans. Like, she knew Baton Rouge well because they had lived there before, but ultimately decided she wouldn't take the kids to Baton Rouge. She just wanted to have a good couple of days with them. She said she wanted to fill the next few days with happy memories for the girls before the inevitable happened. So Mary chose to take her daughters to the beach.
I woke up and chose the beach.
I wake up every day choosing the beach, but
Heather's-
unfortunately, you've not taken me.
I'm going to get you near that beach one day, girl. Oh, yeah, I'm going to move you there.
Please.
Yeah.
Since Mary had missed her appointment at the bank that morning, the bank's now considering legal actions against Mary.
So, yeah, that doesn't surprise me because they were telling her to just do or die. Today's the day. And obviously, they have no idea of everything else going on. So, yeah, they're going to move forward with the authorities, right?
Now, at this point, Mary is starting to get voicemails on her cell phone from people who are concerned about their whereabouts at church. People are calling, asking about Matthew. Where is he? Obviously, the bank's calling. Hey, you missed your appointment. But Mary just ignores all of that and drives to the Gulf Coast. They arrive at Orange Beach in Alabama. And that is when Mary checks in to sleep in on March 23rd with her girls. After a day of playing at the beach, Mary took the girls to the Waffle House for dinner, but they didn't make it there. As she's trying to pull out of the parking lot, red and blue lights flash behind Mary's minivan. And she knew why she was being stopped. It had just been a matter of time before Matthew would be discovered.
So, okay, I'm going to assume that she's using credit cards or checks or something they can trace, not cash.
Probably. I mean, I'm not 100% sure.
I'm going to guess that's how they found her.
Well, Mary spent the next 2 days answering questions. She admitted her role in the death of Matthew Winkler and signed custody of her daughters over to Matthew's parents. She didn't fight extradition and instead drove back to Tennessee with Sheriff Rick Roten and another deputy from the sheriff's office. One of the women parishioners who learned of Mary's arrival at the jail got a list of items the inmates could have and went to Walmart to make the purchases. Over the course of the next few months, church members were quite generous with Mary, bringing her care packages to the jail. Steve Ferris, an attorney in Mississippi, learned from a mutual friend, about Mary, and he knew she would need a good legal defense. He drove to Selmer to introduce himself to Mary Winkler. Ferris afterwards phoned a friend in Memphis, a high-powered attorney named Leslie Ballin, to ask him if he would work the case. Ballin was shocked that his friend Ferris was covering this case with pro bono expenses, basically.
Yeah, I know. I guess God will provide if you believe, right?
Yeah, Ballin asked Ferris, "Are you crazy?" But Ferris was like, "Look, this is the right thing to do. Like, we need to join forces. We need to come to this woman's defense and help her. Like, I think it's the right thing to do, so you need to join me." And Ballin agreed. So now Mary Winkler was going to have these two very high-powered defense attorneys.
Damn.
Yeah.
All right.
Working for free.
And I think is another point you can make is members of her church were very supportive and seemingly generous, and they knew both of them. I would say quite well. I say people in your church, it's like family.
Well,
right?
yeah, and that brings me to my next paragraph, Dylan. In the adult Bible class the following Sunday, a church elder reminded the group not to speculate about what had happened between the minister and his wife, offering that rumors and gossip would not help. He urged the congregation to, quote, pray. He said, "Mary is a member of this church family, and we may be some of the closest family she has at this point. Forgiveness is the cornerstone of our faith. If we don't have forgiveness, then we don't have anything."
Damn, son. That'd make a great t-shirt if it wasn't so wordy.
At Huntingdon Church, the elders assumed that Dan Winkler would sit out the Sunday service because he's just learned his son has been murdered. But he gave a sermon. He talked about love, kindness, gratitude, and forgiveness. Dan Winkler expressed appreciation for those who sat in the pews and thanked law enforcement for the quick job they did in locating his grandchildren. Now, of the female visitors at the jail, most had told Mary they were sorry and wished she had confided in them about the troubles at home. And when they would say this to her, she would just sort of hang her head. But Mary would offer this up to the women. She would tell them, "God is going to take care of us." Now, Selmer had not seen this type of media circus in years. Not since 4 tornadoes touched down in 1991 and had wreaked havoc on the community. But the Winkler murder brought the media out in full force. Everyone wanted to know more about the preacher's wife and why she had shot him.
When was the tornadoes? Back in 99?
91.
So, yeah, this is the biggest news since that tornado night in 91. When everything got blown away. She just blew him away.
People in small towns, we can relate.
Yes, yeah, we come out for entertainment because there's not a lot.
Now, Mary's first appearance in court was solemn. Church members filled just about every seat in the courtroom, and Mary's father was also in attendance. But Mary wouldn't make eye contact with anyone. Instead, it was noted that she held her head down the entire time. Women from the congregation wept openly, and Mary was charged with first-degree murder. A bail hearing was scheduled, and Mary was returned to jail. The lawyers, including the prosecution, didn't speak to the press, but church members, after this initial hearing, were expressing their love and support for Mary, and many of them were saying, "We stand behind her 100%. With approval of the Winklers and law enforcement, Mary was allowed to attend Matthew's funeral service. They escorted her into the chapel. Mary stood by her husband's casket alone, crying. Soon after, her attorney Ferris appeared on the Today Show, where he said his client was detached from the situation, that she had been quiet, confused, and overwhelmed with emotion at times. Dan Winkler told mourners at the funeral, quote, "Our family isn't the first to go through something like this. King David lost 2 sons at the hands of others. God himself knows what this feels like, as he stood by his son's graveside. Now, Mary waived her right to a preliminary hearing, and her case would be remanded to a grand jury. Mary, with a small childlike voice, told them she understood. She also would not seek bond at this time. The grand jury was set for a June hearing to see if they had enough evidence to support this first-degree murder charge. And Mary's attorneys felt her mental state was quite fragile. She was having trouble focusing on important issues. They wanted a forensic psychologist to examine her so they could fully understand maybe what her state of mind was at the time of the murder. Concern was definitely focused on Mary's mental state, and they were very concerned that she might self-harm.
Yeah, I'm sure they have good reasons for those concerns, because it sounds like she's almost like cathartic and like detached from, like you said, the situation. And that would make you very worrisome about what's happening in her, what her mental state's like. And you always want to know if people are mentally, are able to be held,
Accountable?
Yeah, so, mentally, able to be held.
Are they mentally competent to handle and stand trial? Yes.
Yeah, you know the thing.
Yes,
you
Tom.
know the thing. Yeah, that. You always want to know that, right? That's almost as important as what kind of chips they got in the vending machine.
Well, when asked, why did you waive this preliminary hearing, Faris, her attorney, noted he didn't think it would do any good for people to hear bad things about the victim, and it wouldn't be good for Mary to attend this preliminary hearing and kind of have to rehash some of this. Yeah.
He didn't have a lot of hope that the preliminary. So I'm assuming the preliminary is to see if you have enough evidence to go to a grand jury and then get a full-on indictment. So in his mind, very small chance that it's going to go away. So don't put her through that.
Mary was seen by Dr. Lynn Zager, a clinical psychologist in Jackson, Tennessee. Now, initially, after hearing the news reports, Zager thought this woman might be suffering from some type of PTSD. She was eager to speak with Mary, and she offered her services pro bono. She explained to Mary that everything they spoke about could make its way into open court. Mary was obviously trying to sway the doctor from thinking she had any kind of mental issues. She was trying to put on almost like this "I'm very well" facade.
Well, that's more natural than someone's like, "Oh yeah, dude, I'm kind of crazy," like somebody acting.
But Dr. Zager concluded that this woman, who seemed to be in denial, had problems with her thinking, trusting, and psychological functioning.
And was still trying to convince the doctor that she's okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Mary's attorneys appeared on Nancy Grace and some other television shows discussing how unusual the case was and how their client Mary was not a bad person. Some thought the attorneys' insinuation that Church of Christ was a cult was unacceptable because the lawyers were definitely trying to blame some of this on the church. This is a religion where men are controlling and in charge. They don't allow women to really have a voice. She stayed because she, was compelled because of her religious belief, these kinds of things, which the church felt like, and they basically came out and said, we feel like this church is a cult. The church was not happy with that.
Well, no, and from the lawyer's perspective, I'm sure they thought they were right in framing it like that, and I'm sure it doesn't surprise me that members of the church took offense.
Well, they were very offended because they were like, after all, Mary Winkler is on trial, not the church.
Well, and that's true. And
so you're making some bold statements about our beliefs.
Right.
Our church is not the issue here.
No, I would say it's Mary and Matthew's relationship and their actions is what should only. But I see why the lawyers do that.
No, I understand.
Because they always like to, drag that big red herring up on the table, and they just need that one person, that one person say, well, I'm not sure.
So while Mary's in jail awaiting trial, she was caught taking a prescription pill from another inmate, and they suspended her visitation rights. On Mother's Day, Mary didn't want visits from her little girls, afraid of how they would feel seeing their mom in this orange jumpsuit. Mary had settled into a dull routine at jail where she was housed with about 20 other women, and they mostly said she was quiet and kept to herself and just seemed like almost in a fugue state. On June 12th of 2006, a true bill of indictment was passed down charging Mary Winkler with first-degree murder. She pled not guilty, and her attorneys then went on to file 25 motions to the judge. The first was asking for bond, because at first they didn't try to get bond, but now they're going to. Mary wasn't properly advised of her constitutional rights, so the attorneys argued that her initial statement should not be allowed in court. They also said evidence seized from the minivan was done so illegally and violated her 4th and 14th Amendment rights. Also, she was illegally arrested as there was no probable cause to detain her in the first place. Because all they had was a report that Matthew Winkler was dead and that his wife and children were missing. So they didn't really have any reason to pull her over as though she was a suspect. Is what our lawyers are saying.
Okay, and so there's no probable cause. And that means that everything that happened after the probable cause and they made contact is inadmissible. So here's some huge statements their defense attorneys are making. And they're actually right. If she wasn't Mirandized, it's a big deal. If she didn't understand exactly what was going on while they were asking her questions. If she was actually a suspect, a big deal. So, yeah, I mean, you can tell these lawyers know what they're doing.
They do.
They're throwing everything at it.
Well, after 5 sessions, Dr. Zager reported that Mary was suffering from PTSD, which began when her sister died in childhood. Since then, Mary had multiple episodes where she had lost track of herself and had poor impulse control. She also suffered from mild depression. Zager thought Mary was in a dissociative state when she had shot Matthew, which would explain why Mary seemed to have no recollection of the event. Because every time it was mentioned, Mary was confused or didn't know exactly what had happened.
Wow. So, because this is a tough one. I will say that Matthew seemed like an asshole and there didn't seem to be some types of abuse going on. But the tricky part is what exactly was happening when she shot him.
Well, that's the thing with PTSD, and I'm not a psychiatrist or anything, but I mean, I do have a diagnosis. And I can say that it is a very invisible disability. It is an invisible thing that a lot of people look at you, they think you're totally normal. But PTSD really, that trauma can really change the way you think, the decisions that you make, your impulse control. Anytime that you're feeling threatened. I know for me, I have a very strong fight or flight sense of get me out of a situation that is, hard for me. And typically I try to get out of the situation. Like, I don't want to fight. I'm just trying to get the fuck away from whatever's happening, So I think a lot of times it can be hard to prove that, like, this PTSD, how it relates and can make you
she had it. This is what triggered
in a certain
it.
way.
This is how she acted afterwards.
Because it is something that people don't. It's not a visible thing that people can see. It's not tangible.
Right. And from the layperson's true crime, you're going to be like, hey, he wasn't, but he wasn't beating you up. He wasn't, you didn't think you were going to die. All these things. You left the situation, went and got the gun out of the closet. These are all earmarks for first degree. Premeditation. It really is. But if you consider what's maybe truly happening in her brain, then that's a big deal.
Well, yeah, and for Mary, this trigger of seeing her husband putting his hands over their baby's mouth,
right,
which she had seen him do before, and she just had enough. And then he's ignoring her when she's trying to talk to him,
and all these other things, the finances, everything just at once. It's almost just like she
just
popped.
Sort of snapped.
Right. Okay.
And, for people who don't experience this mental issue, it can be hard to wrap your head around. But I guess just reading through Mary's case and researching it and having my own experiences, I guess I come from a very, sympathetic place, empathetic, because I can understand, that concept of just sort of snapping.
Yeah, and I'm not saying you're wrong. And I think her lawyers are doing a good job of steering the conversation. You know what I'm saying? Yeah, she did it. There's no doubt about that. You just got to accept that. But here's why.
Yeah.
And it wasn't what would be determined to be first degree murder. And that's the only point they can make.
Well, after being given a bond, Mary was finally released into the custody of a couple, Kathy and Rudy Thomason, and their son who lived on Fairview Road in Selmer. Now, at first, Mary kept her to herself when she lived with this family, but started to slowly integrate into their family life. Part of the release and this bond release that she would be in their custody is that they had offered her employment at their dry cleaners. It was called Express Cleaners. Mary had been a customer there before, and they knew her. So they were like, let her live with us. We'll give her a job. We'll make sure she shows up to court.
Right.
And do what she needs to do. During this time, Mary also began attending Central Church of Christ, but not everybody welcomed her there. After a small period of time, she ended up finding a different church because people were like, we don't really know if we want her here. A lot of folks were having a struggle with the forgiveness aspect of their religious beliefs.
Well,
now,
and I think that this is going to be one of those cases where you're going to have sides. You
now,
know what I mean?
yeah.
I think people are going to feel very strongly about their position on that.
Well,
side.
and a lot of people, I mean, they knew Matthew Winkler.
Right.
He had a decent reputation, but they knew the Winkler family. They knew Dan. They knew the grandfather who's published. I mean, these are people who have really strong roots in this Church of Christ community.
Right.
So clearly people are going to have some feelings, some mixed feelings about what has happened with Matthew. So friends and family had no place to stay when they would try to visit with Mary. So there was another family, church family, that offered up an empty house that they could use for overnight stays, which is kind of cool.
Well, this is community.
So that her Knoxville, her dad and her siblings from Knoxville could drive, hours away to stay and visit her and attend her hearings.
Whether or not you're religious, you cannot take away from the sense of community, especially in smaller towns a lot of times. And it's true, I'm sure, in urban areas as well. This close-knit church family and your willingness. Honestly, they were doing a crowdfunding before the internet was invented. If you take all the church, I've said this, and I'm not religious. I'm not religious at all. But I have no problem with people who are. I think everyone should be free to believe what they believe. But if you took out all the help that churches do from every community overnight, there would be a crisis across this country. I don't think people realize.
Well, no, up until we started, using tax dollars to fund the homeless and soup kitchens and those kinds of things, communities relied solely on the generosity of the community members and the churches.
Yeah, that's what
back in the day, if you were sick, it was the ladies of the church who brought your family meals and cared for you,
or
and
your neighbors,
and acted as a nurse to you and took care of you, nursed you through your sickness, through childbirth.
Right.
All of the things.
So it's a big deal, and it's about community. And
I think seeing the way everyone came together in support of her, despite. These people could have shunned her. They could have turned their backs on her.
Right.
Completely blackballed her. But the way they've all come together to try and support this woman who's they feel like is clearly hurting and her children.
Right.
And, this whole family has just, their whole lives have been wrecked, right? And they're trying really hard to help maintain some normalcy. And though Mary, she was bound by the terms of her bond agreement, so she wasn't allowed to go move into this house, but they say she was over there every day cleaning, fixing it up, like making it a home where she could hang out with her family and her kids. She was allowed supervised visits with her children. Often they took place at Dan Winkler's church, where she would be able to, watch a movie with her kids. They could have popcorn together, and they would usually have, maybe some ladies from the church who would volunteer to supervise the visits. Mary's family, including her dad, did an interview with Glamour magazine where they discussed the abuse, how Matthew had controlled every aspect of his wife's life, from the dresses she was allowed to wear to what she was allowed to eat. Nothing was left up for discussion. But when this story was published, the Winklers were very angry and hurt by these statements, obviously. Because they're like, our son's not here to defend himself.
Yeah, I get that. But here's the thing.
This isn't okay.
Are these statements true? And that's where I would begin as his family member. And we might not have any source that we trust, if you will, to corroborate it. But I don't know. I guess I could see you being a little bit tribal in this situation. Hey, that's my son, my family. And again, if they never saw that side of him, because it seemed like he did a fairly good job of presenting an image to the public, he may do the same with his family. You know, he may save most of that for when they're just alone. No one sees that type of thing, or it's not true and it didn't happen, and someone else is lying. Mary's lying, right? I mean, that's really your only two options,
Right. And so I want to mention this Glamour article, Dylan, because this really creates a rift between the Winklers and Mary's family.
Well, see, I was
Because,
wondering,
like, up until this point, the Winklers, they have custody of her girls, but they are agreeing to supervised visits.
even using my church.
But when this article comes out, they're going to begin the process of alienating these girls from their mother. And so we're going to get into that here in a moment.
And see, that's one of the reasons when they just keep on and on and on in the press and get more and more and deeper into it. That's when I think it doesn't serve the public. We don't really need to know all these intimate details, and it only hurts the people involved. And this, I think, is a prime example of that.
Now, after this Glamour article comes out, the Winklers are very pissed off. They're not okay with this. Then some photos are released, if you will, of Mary at a New Year's Eve celebration. So some friends had invited Mary to go out. During this time, she is living with the family, working at the dry cleaners, and she's trying to stay out of the public eye. So she's not going anywhere, doing anything. But some friends encourage her to go out on New Year's Eve.
Oh, God.
Mary joins them, and some of these pictures show Mary sitting at the bar. She's smoking, and there's a beer in the frame. But Mary's friends maintain she was not drinking on this particular night. She was, in fact, smoking, but that was the extent of it, is she had a cigarette or two, which that's what's wrong with that, right? But the world jumped onto this photo and thought it painted the image of a woman who had no cares in the world and had murdered her husband and is now out in the bar drinking and smoking and carrying on and having a good time and partying when she's going to trial for murder.
Watch her. She's enjoying that.
The preacher's wife, she's now a raging harlot.
That draft beer at 36 degrees, 35 rather.
Do you see those Virginia Slims she's smoking? She's the devil.
God, that devil cabbage going right into her lungs.
Okay, so the prosecution, they began to offer Mary some plea deals. First, they offer her a plea deal of a life sentence with the death penalty off the table.
Oh, yeah, that's a juicy one.
But she declines. Then they offer Mary a 35-year sentence, but her attorneys advise her once again to turn this deal down. The state made more deals. Eventually, they take the death penalty off the table. They're trying every way in the world to get Mary to plea. They don't want to take this to trial. They want to plea it out.
Okay, hear me out. Life sentence, lifetime supply of Skittles. No?
I don't like Skittles.
You don't like Skittles? Life sentence, a lifetime supply of Carmelos.
Can I have some Rolos?
Yes.
Sign
right now. We got this.
I'll think about it.
Okay.
But Mary refuses all of the deals. The Winklers, in the meantime, file a $2 million wrongful death suit against Mary.
A civil suit.
Mary's lawyers argued about the alienation of the children and how the Winklers had purposefully kept the children away from their mother, especially after the release of this Glamour article.
Right. When she, without fighting, of course she was in a bad spot, willingly gave custody over to them, of the children, their grandchildren, right? Early on, she wasn't seeking bail. She was trying to set responsibility. And, this is such a tricky situation, especially when kids are involved.
Well, with this lawsuit, and the mention that the Winklers have, in the meantime, have stopped allowing the girls to visit. They are keeping the girls from their mother. The judge is like, I need to sort of set the record straight. I need to figure out what's going on. So the judge brings these young girls in to the courtroom and starts asking them questions and concludes, based on the information that the girls have given the judge concludes that their papa, which is their grandfather, Dan Winkler, had given them information about their mom being bad, that she had killed their dad and that she had stolen money from the bank.
Oh, shit.
And so basically everything was Mary's fault. Mary was a bad person and had convinced the girls that they didn't need to be in the presence of their mother.
And he's not going to be okay with that.
So
the judge is not going to be okay with that,
so the
right?
judge is like, okay, this is interesting.
Alienation,
right?
yeah.
So that's happening at the same time that Mary goes to trial. And her trial begins on April 12th of 2007. 6 days later, on April 18th, Mary would take the stand in her own defense. She told the jurors, which were definitely a jury of her peers, Dylan, there were 10 women and 2 men in the jury box.
Damn.
That her husband was verbally abusive, often berating her, and how he forced her to wear, quote, slutty costumes for sex. Mary's attorneys introduced a pair of heels and a wig for the courtroom to see, items that Matthew had expressed interest in sexually.
In the courtroom gas because it's so slutty.
Mary described how her husband pressed her for oral and anal sex, which she thought was unnatural. And she had told him on multiple occasions, all of this made her feel very uncomfortable. Faris and Ballin used the boilerplate defense for many gunshot cases, that their client was holding the gun, but she didn't mean to fire it.
Okay.
That she did get the gun, but it accidentally went off.
Now, this is a bold move for the defense anytime to put the defendant on the stand. Very seldom do they want you. They think they weigh the costs or the pros and cons. You may help yourself, but in the cross-examination, you're going to get ripped apart on, some other points we were trying to shore up. So we just want to give them the opportunity. So it's very interesting that they put Mary on. And I'm going to guess, I'm no lawyer, I'm going to guess it's because they wanted the jury to see her, how she acts, how she's meek and kind of diminutive as she's giving her answers back, right? Maybe?
I'm sure. And Mary admitted while on stand that she had in fact pointed the shotgun at her husband's back, but she said she did not intend to pull the trigger. Mary indicated that she was in a state of near delirium over their marriage. Their checking account was overdrawn by $5,000 and that she was under pressure from Matthew over this check-kiting scheme. When the gun accidentally fired, she said her instinct was to flee. So she packed up her daughters and drove to the beach. Mary's defense discussed how Matthew destroyed objects his wife had loved, isolated her from her family in Knoxville, and how he had put constant pressure on her, and that Mary felt like she was walking on eggshells for every moment of her life. Matthew had a lot to live up to as far as his family name and was always trying to impress his own father. Matthew had felt intense stress and needs to satisfy the demands his family put on him by securing a church of his own. And how Mary had, in essence, become a whipping boy for Matthew. And that he had began taking basically everything out on Mary, from his shirts not being ironed correctly to,
my daddy don't love me.
His car didn't start. It would be Mary's fault. Everything. He was always yelling at Mary and blaming her for everything that went wrong.
And that's emotional and verbal abuse, man, because you're always the whipping post. It's never okay. You never get a moment off. And she's dealing with all these kids. She's had multiple children. She's had miscarriages.
She's had to move.
Why is she moving? Because of his job. Yeah.
The third trimester of her pregnancies.
It didn't seem like she was able to properly grieve for her sister. And there's a reason that grieving is in a 7-step process. It takes time. And it really does, I think, take you recognizing as you move through those stages, being cognizant of where you're at in your process. And if you never get a chance to go through that, even, in some fashion, I think it weighs on you.
It does.
Let alone with somebody you're very, very close with. I lost my sister. As adults, we had grown not super close, but that still hurt, and I know it tore my mom up because they lived together. But yeah, so I really do think it started then. I think it started building then with the PTSD and whatever you want to call it. And the type of guy Matthew was, it was just
Well, and I think you have to look at Mary as she's a person who's grown up with this particular faith where her father ruled the roost at home.
right.
He set the tone for the household. He was doling out the rules. This is how we're running the show.
Oh, by the way, that's
And
how I'm going to run our household.
Mary has always been sort of in a place of obedience and has been subservient to the men in her life because she was in a household where her father made the rules. Now she's in a marriage where the husband makes the rules, and she's never known life beyond that. This is what she's been conditioned to do, to be subservient, to take a back seat, to never have a voice, never have an opinion. And you couple that with the abuse, her PTSD. I mean, this is not a good situation for anybody to be in.
It's not.
But much less somebody like Mary, who's already kind of been conditioned to be a whipping boy. I mean, they've basically set her up to be this subservient. You're going to take all the shit from whatever man you marry, and you'll keep your mouth shut and you'll be happy.
Yeah, well, he, Matthew may have grown up. And I'm not going to say his dad was doing this, but it's possible seeing him come unload on his mom and his wife every evening.
But
We don't know if that's a learned behavior. Oftentimes it is in some form or fashion. Or it was just the intense pressure of Matthew was feeling from his dad, his family, to carry on the legacy,
Well,
I've never dealt with anything like that.
Well, attorneys would say that Matthew, they brought up the fact that he would tell Mary to stop eating lunch because she was fat. That when she didn't like the way Mary talked, that he would correct her or he would call her out. That he told her how to wear her hair, how to dress. He would approve her wardrobe, her makeup.
Mm-mm.
He would let her know if she looked acceptable to leave the house.
No, that is an insecure person. That is the only person that acts like that, man or woman, is insecure. They're insecure, and they don't know how to deal with it for themselves, so they look like they're controlling everything when they're really not. See, they can't chance you going out with 2 inches of cleavage showing because he's insecure and he knows he treats you like shit deep down, and he's afraid somebody's going to, be like, hey, your boobs look great, and you might move in with them. So,
well,
necklines.
Mary's attorneys, the defense definitely painted an image of this woman that was expected to be perfect. And when she failed or didn't meet these unreasonable standards, her husband would react negatively, often with physical and verbal assault.
Or slutty wigs and high heels. It's just whatever. It depends on the day.
I actually have a photo of the slutty high heels.
Do you really? I'll
We're going to post them on Instagram.
I have to see those.
Now, the prosecution tried to paint Mary as a criminal who wrote bad checks and murdered her husband to cover up financial problems. But Mary's attorneys painted, again, Mary as a woman who did what she was told to do. That Matthew had not wanted to fix the financial situation, but instead told his wife, you need to get my name off the account so it's not going to mess with my credit. And that Mary had taken steps to ensure her husband would not be impacted. She had taken an account out in her own name. She was desperately trying to get his name removed from their joint account. That it was solely on Mary to fix this situation, and that she was only acting as her husband had directed her to.
Right.
So it was not to try to cover up her crime, but she's doing everything that her husband's telling her to do.
But this would be, from the prosecution's perspective, this is an easy motive. She has done this thing with the checking account. And they could even try to be like, hey, she's been juggling money. How long has she been juggling money? Is she taking money from Matthew? Whatever. And now here's the pressure. It's come to a head. They're telling her to do something now. She's scared to tell her husband. And boom, she kills him to cover it up.
Well, and according to Mary's lawyers, and they made a really good point with this, Dylan, Matthew set her up for failure all the time. That nothing Mary did was without approval. And that if she failed, it's because her husband had set her up to fail, because everything she did was a direct result of what he ordered her to do.
It's been rammed past him.
Yes.
He's been told about it.
Yeah.
Wow.
So throughout the process, Mary's attorneys noted how she had not wanted to smear Matthew's name. Mary had not wanted, she didn't want to talk about the abuse. She still would talk about how she loved him, how she cared about him, that she hadn't really wanted to be divorced from him. Mary had wanted to accept blame for everything. Mary failed to get Matthew's attention at every turn. Again, he's the preacher. He's the one who's well-liked. And he had almost always refused to talk to her about important issues. So Mary lost it in these moments and finally demanded her husband's attention because she was tired of being invisible.
Yeah, I don't blame her.
In this moment, Mary is like, I've had enough. Now, during the trial, Dan Winkler admitted that he had used funds from the Children's Trust because there had been a lot of money raised after Matthew's death. And, just much of the property that Matthew had possessed and finances, this had all been set up into a trust for the kids. And Dan Winkler admitted that they had used some of the money from the trust fund to take the kids to Disney World on spring break.
Uh-oh.
And that this had been at a time when Mary was trying to see the kids, that he had purposefully violated a visit, withheld the kids to take them out of town so that they wouldn't be able to see their mom. Mary's attorneys insisted that the Winklers were using every trick in their bag to keep the children from their mother. And on the stand, Faris brought up the lawsuit, asking Dan Winkler if he wanted Mary to have no future. He said, quote, "You don't want her to have any future. You don't want her to have any dreams. You don't want her to have any money. And you don't want her to have her children."
What the hell?
Dan Winkler also admitted that in their faith, the husband was in charge of the household. Faris had Dan admit as well that after that Glamour article appeared in print, that is when he stopped allowing the girls to visit with their mother. Now, on April 19th, the jury came back with the verdict, Dylan, guilty of voluntary manslaughter. The jury decided not to fully convict on the first-degree murder charge. A Tennessee judge sentenced Mary Winkler to 210 days in prison and gave her credit for the 5 months already served. She was permitted to spend up to 60 days of her sentence in a mental health facility, and the rest of her sentence could be served on probation.
Damn.
Mary appeared on the Oprah Winfrey Show in September of 2007, admitting that she was given a slap on the wrist. Mary was able to win back custody of her girls in August of 2008, and her in-laws were ordered to pay back the money they had spent out of the Children's Trust Fund. Today, Mary lives a quiet life out of the public eye. Her focus is to be a mom to her 3 daughters. At this time, her location is undisclosed, so I'm not really sure where Mary's living these days. But I do know that in 2010, she was diagnosed with MS.
Oh, gosh. Poor woman.
Now, my resources for today's story, The Pastor's Wife by Diane Fanning, a great read, very interesting. And also a book called She Killed the Pastor by Kevin Gould. And I watched a snapped episode on Mary Winkler that aired in October of 2007.
I take offense to the title of that show, For Women.
Snapped?
Yeah. Well, no, it kind of has this, she's emotional and she just went crazy. You know what I mean? It's like, yeah, it's just the shows about women that are done like that, presented like that.
Well, we could have a show about men called Snapped.
Well, you could, but they're not gonna. They're not gonna.
Or family annihilators. They just snapped.
Well, yeah, but they're not gonna frame it like that because it's men. You see what I'm saying?
What do you think is a more appropriate title, Dylan?
I killed my husband because he has a stupid face. Part 7.
Okay.
All right. And I would like to, again, give a quick shout out to our patrons, Jamie, Jen, and Chrissy.
Christy.
I'm sorry. Thank you so much for supporting us over at patreon.com/Mountain Murders Podcast.
Yeah, if you have a case suggestion, you can always shoot us an email, mountainmurderspodcast@gmail.com. You can find us on Instagram at Appalachian True Crime. We are on Twitter at Mountain Murders Podcast.
We are on there all the time.
Yeah, and you can find our website, mountainmurderspodcast.com, and you can actually listen to the show directly from our website if you wish to do that. We are also on YouTube, so we would like folks to subscribe there. Yeah, we would love folks to subscribe to YouTube because that is a platform where we've been for quite a few years.
It is.
But people don't always think to listen to their podcasts on YouTube.
And Heather's figured out a way to film my dumb face. So I'm going to have some video over there soon.
Yeah, we're really trying to move, and we've been saying that for a couple of years. But now that Dylan is, semi-retired or whatever.
Fully retired.
Whatever the fuck he's doing. We are thinking of actually trying some video work. So YouTube will probably be a great place to to catch some of those clips.
It will be.
Dylan, until next time.
Bye.
Stay frothy.
Oh, I'm frothing right now.
Bye.
Bye.